This is Method to the Madness, a bi-weekly public affairs show on KALX Berkeley celebrating Bay Area innovators. I'm your host, Lisa Kiefer, and today I'm speaking with Adam Parks, owner of Victorian Farmstead Meat Company and board member of the Bay Area Ranchers Cooperative. Today he'll be speaking about the co-op and how it's creating a more environmentally responsible and more humane approach to slaughtering animals. The first true attempt at a sustainable arrangement for local ranchers, creating a truly local meat economy.
My name is Adam Parks. I am the Vice President of the Bay Area Ranchers Cooperative, and we are a group of 17 founding members, all local ranchers, butchers, farmers in Northern California. And the problem we're trying to solve is that for as long as I've been in business, a decade now, we have had terrible access to processing for our animals, both slaughter and cut and wrap. That process was compounded last December when Marin Sun Farms shut its doors to all producers that weren't under their own label. That meant that we were, instead of hauling our animals to Petaluma, a fairly central location, our ranchers were having to move their animals up to Eureka, out to Orland, Modesto, down as far as Visalia. And that was the closest USDA processing that we have access to as of right now. So we got together in the spring and we formed a research committee and we looked into the possibility of bringing a mobile harvesting unit into Northern California. And so we did a market analysis of, we reached out to over 200 local ranchers that were going direct to consumer. Direct to consumer from our standpoint is ranchers that are selling direct to the public, whether it's through a community supported ag program, whether it's through farmers markets, web sales. A lot of our ranchers sold to restaurants before COVID and are having to adapt to that change in their business model. And we quickly found out that there was a very high demand for what we were looking to accomplish. And so July 28th, we formed a LLC co-op, T Corporation, and we did all the legal filings and everything. And our board of directors, there's 9 of us, have been working since then to develop a program for bringing the unit down. It's being built in Washington State. And we are also looking at acquiring a piece of property in Sonoma County where we will house our business.
Let's talk about some of the challenges. You said you started in July. How long before that had you all been working toward this?
Well, Marin Sun Farms closed down to everybody effective December of last year. There was a big meeting at the Sonoma County Farm Bureau with probably 40 or 50 of us in January. And we formed our exploratory committee in March. And so there was probably 3.5 months of solid research done by that committee. Once we had that research done and knew that this was something we wanted to pursue, that's when we formed our co-op.
That's pretty quick.
It has been a wild, wild ride, I can tell you.
Well, what about any kind of legislative challenges like federal inspection? And what about exemptions to federal inspections?
For four-legged animals, for beef and pork and sheep, goats, there are no exemptions. And if you're going to sell to the public, you need to process in a USDA inspected facility. There haven't been a lot of challenges so far. We've been fortunate in that the people on the board, myself and the rest of my board members, we've been doing this for a while. And so we're pretty familiar with what we can and can't do and what has to be inspected and how it has to be inspected. So as we went about building this co-op and writing the bylaws and submitting the articles of incorporation and everything, that's the easy side for us. The hard side is we're a bunch of ranchers and butchers, and so getting our heads wrapped around the legalese. We've got a great team of advisors, lawyers and CPAs and UCCE people that have really walked us down the path of making sure we did this the right way.
So Marin County voted yes to this mobile unit.
Yeah, Marin County voted yes to the ability to harvest on a ranch. Yeah, one of the things about a mobile unit that's a little different is you have to think of it more in terms of a mobile home, meaning that you can move it, but generally you don't. From a strict business standpoint, if you were to make it a strictly mobile unit where you were going ranch to harvest, that's kind of been the death knell for a number of businesses that have attempted this. And the reason is because there's so much time wasted in setup and tear down and driving. So our model has us finding a home for it and parking it there for the majority of the time it's in service and having the local ranchers bring the animals to the unit.
How do you figure out where to put a unit like that?
Well, that's one of the advantages to having a mobile unit is that it avoids a lot of the regulation, not in terms of inspection for the animals or anything like that, but in terms of we don't need a use permit, for instance, because it's mobile. It doesn't require a use permit by the county. So we've identified a property in Sonoma County that is currently being used as a USDA plant, and we will be putting the unit out there.
Okay, so I understand that there's a lack of processing infrastructure. Many of us know about factory farming, but compare what is the current method today with what you guys are doing.
Sure. We saw over the course of the summer, as you know, there was a lot of talk about the impending meat shortage because so many meat plants of the big corporate ag businesses were shutting down due to COVID. And you were hearing stories of millions of animals being euthanized, lots of chickens, lots of pigs. And the reason for that is twofold. One is these factory processing plants, like Smithfield out of Iowa, that's an 8-story plant. They are harvesting tens of thousands of hogs a day, basically on a conveyor belt. And you have all these employees that are standing shoulder to shoulder. And as the carcass goes by, they're making one small cut. And that's all they do all day long. In America, this just doesn't have to do with meat necessarily, but with all our delivery systems, we are extremely efficient at delivering product to the consumer. The problem is we are also extremely fragile because of that. And we saw that happen specifically in the meat industry, where because a few people got sick in a plant, that shut down the plant, and all of a sudden that Smithfield plant handles 10% of the pork in the country. That's a big chunk of bacon that's not being processed. One of the other side effects of that is that plant can only handle X size hogs, meaning they can only the hogs have to be a minimum of this size and a maximum of this size. And anything larger will not go through their system. So the reason that all those animals had to be euthanized was they had no way to process them because they simply outgrew the factory's ability to handle it. The difference with us is that because we are a small, nimble, local processing plant, just like the ones we use right now that we have to drive so far away to get to, we have the ability to handle any size hog because we're doing them one at a time. And we have, this is people that specialize in this work and can handle large hogs, small hogs, roasting hogs, doesn't matter. We are taking care for the humanity of the animal. We're being super respectful of the animals as they're being processed. To give you an example, cows do not like right turns. So that's why in most cattle ranches, most cattle corrals, you'll never see a square corral. It's usually got rounded corners because cattle don't like sharp turns.
What happens to them when they make a sharp turn?
It just stresses them out. It freaks them out.
So there are stress hormones. I've read about that.
Yeah. So, and that's what, Temple Grandin did a fantastic study on this. She's world renowned for this. And so when we build corrals for our processing, cattle will go through a rounded corner. Lambs, for example, sheep don't like to be alone. They freak out. If you ever go to the county fair and you see a lamb by itself in a pen, it's probably going to be freaking out. That's why they're always penned up in pairs or fours. Same at slaughter time. We want these animals to be well cared for and respected right up until the very end. Clean, fresh water, the best possible feeds all the way through. None of us want to see these animals stressed out in the last moments. The other thing is, from a very practical business standpoint, it's really bad product when you stress an animal out right before slaughtering.
When you look at the meat from a factory farm animal versus a locally slaughtered animal, it actually looks different, doesn't it?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, there's a million factors that go into that. One is the crap they're fed. One is the stress they go through at processing. When you stress out an animal right before you harvest it, right before you kill it, you're going to inject all kinds of adrenaline and endorphins and whatnot directly into the muscles. That's that fight or flight factor that we're all used to, right? When we get stressed out, you see these videos of superhuman little teeny women that are lifting up cars off their kids because they're under them, right? That's where our bodies are pumped full of chemicals that will help us through that scary situation. It's the same for animals. And so if we can make sure that our animals that we've taken all these months and all these years to raise properly and give them a very relaxed, comforting setting to be harvested in, we're going to get a better end product, never mind the importance of the humanity and the respect to the animal.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Method to the Madness, a bi-weekly public affairs show on KALX Berkeley, celebrating Bay Area innovators. Today I'm speaking with Adam Parks about the Bay Area Ranchers Cooperative, a more environmentally responsible and humane way to harvesting their livestock. And a lot of your farmers already use regenerative farming. Can you talk a little bit about how this is cutting down on greenhouse gases?
It's a really, really easy picture to paint, right? Because if you look at Northern California, right around the greater Bay Area, particularly Marin and Sonoma counties, that's where the majority of our initial members are from. And so all of us are driving, whether it's up to Eureka, which is 250 miles round trip. So that's a 10-hour day, right, for the guys that are hauling those trailers up there full of cattle. Out to Orland, which is 120 miles, out to Visalia, out to Modesto. That's a pretty massive carbon footprint. So if we can find a place here in Sonoma County, which we've identified to house this, now all those farms and ranches will be able to drive less than 50 miles to harvest their animals. Not only is it better from a business standpoint, where you're not spending all that windshield time, you're not spending all that fuel, it's also better for the animals because they're spending less time in a trailer.
Right. And there's a documentary out called Kiss the Ground. It's all about soil management or mismanagement. Is that something you farmers as a part of this co-op, talk about as well?
As a co-op, no. And it's not because we don't care about it. Pretty much every single member that's in the co-op now practices regenerative agriculture in one capacity or another. One of the things that we have done as a co-op, as a board of directors, is to make sure that we're staying in our lanes. While we have a huge affinity for all the ranches, and we are ranches and businesses that practice regenerative agriculture, our focus is on processing. And so we are not in the business of telling anybody that they have to do this or they have to do that and how they raise their animals. Our role in this industry is to make sure that the animals are processed as humanely as possible and as locally as possible.
You mentioned in an article that it's something about the Prime Act. What is that? How does that affect you guys?
The Prime Act is expanding the ability of ranches to be able to process and deliver, small local ranches to be able to have animals processed and delivered direct to consumers. The people in our co-op, at least right now, the vast majority of them wouldn't necessarily fall into the Prime Act as it sits right now. If it passes, that will just make it more accessible to people. We've lost a lot of really great small ranches and farms because they simply couldn't afford to drive those great distances or didn't want to stress their animals out that way.
And how about funding for this project? Who are you going to fund this?
Yeah, fundraising's that is our huge focus right now. We started our major fundraising campaign started in late September, and we have a couple different ways that we are fundraising for this. We have preferred stock offerings in a couple different capacities. Our Series 1 preferred stock is a minimum of 50,000 shares at $1 a piece, so $50,000 on up to $1 million. And we have, I think, 6 investors committed at that level right now. And then we have a crowdfunding offering as well. It's called a Reg CF. It's basically the equivalent of a GoFundMe for preferred stock. And so that is available to anybody. Starts at $500 as the minimum investment, up to $50,000. And you can go on to the portal that we're using. It has to be done through a regulated portal. And the portal that we're using is called WeFunder, WeFunder. And if you go to WeFunder and search Bay Area Ranchers, you'll find our page there. And I think we're around 125,000 of the $1 million goal that we have for that offering as well.
And for how long is this going to be up?
It's definitely up through the end of this year. It just depends on when we hit our goal. That's not to say we're going to turn anybody away after. We have 2 major initiatives that we're funding right now. One is the trailer, which is going to be built up in Washington State. We're putting the deposit down on that. In fact, it's probably happening as I speak that we'll put the deposit down on that trailer to get the process started of having it built so that we can be up and running in March or April of next year. The second initiative is for the purchase of the property. And we're super fortunate. We have a letter of intent from Sonoma Ag and Open Space that is their commitment to help us purchase the property. But we would just assume fundraise and be able to do it without a loan. And so between the WeFunder platform and, our ranchers have pretty extensive networks. I mean, anytime you do farmers markets, right? You got a lot of people coming into your booth and that you're talking to on a regular basis. My business, Victorian Farmstead Meat Company, we do 10 farmers markets a week. And my customers know about this struggle. I've written about it in my newsletters, just like all my other board members and founding members have. And so it's really neat to see our customers come and support, whether they're pitching in $500 on WeFunder or they just simply forward the message on to somebody else. We had a $25,000 investor show up this weekend that nobody had ever heard of because they heard it 3 places removed. They got a copy of the email and just thought it was a really cool idea and wanted to support it and have the ability to do so.
So on your site, does it list all of the ranchers and talk about them at all? Is there kind of a background bio?
Yes, it's WeFunder is the website that you want to go to. We have our own website. Our website is bayarearanchers.com. You can go there and there are links on the investor page that take you right to the WeFunder page. So you can get all the information you need there, and I'll certainly provide my phone number and email addresses in case anybody's interested in calling me directly. I am the investment coordinator. It's Adam Parks, and my phone number is 707-332-4605. And my email address is aparks@bayarearanchers.com.
What were the challenges in finding the location for a mobile unit?
We were super lucky. We found a location that was an existing USDA certified plant that was going out of business. And kind of a dream scenario for us. It's going to allow us to do some things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. Not only is the slaughter a bottleneck for local producers, but cut and wrap also has to be done under USDA inspection, and it is every bit as daunting a task to get cut and wrap at any one of the very few local cut and wrap facilities. And so because this is already an existing USDA plant and has a bricks and mortar component to it, we expect to be able to provide cut and wrap services to our members as well right from day one.
It sort of creates a redundant system in our nation. I would think that other places are going to try to duplicate this.
Yeah, we've been contacted by a number of groups, Ohio, Oklahoma, kind of all over the country that have heard about what we're doing and are very, very interested to see, A, are we going to be successful? And B, if this model works. One of the things that we loved about the co-op model is, from a business standpoint, anytime you can get your owners to be your customers, you're pretty much guaranteed to have a flow of business. And while if we ever have space, we will certainly allow outside, non-member business to fill our voids. We really don't expect to have a lot of that. When we did the initial marketing survey back in the spring of last year, with all the market analysis and all the different moving parts and whatnot, there is over 200% demand for what our capacity is just in 80 local ranchers. And we surveyed 200, we got 80 responses back. So that means there's a whole bunch of other ranchers out there that didn't fill out the survey or whatever and that are out there, but we know that they're also direct to market businesses as well.
So this is a unique, no one else is doing this.
Well, it's been tried a number of different times, and there's a few places that are operational. J&R Meats down in Paso Robles has a trailer. I don't believe they're in operation right now, but they were up until fairly recently. And there's a few other places that have, I think that have tried this. And part of the challenge, as I think I said earlier, is that a lot of them take this mobile unit and make it mobile. And while it sounds counterintuitive from a business standpoint, the less time you're driving around, the more time you're processing, and that's where the money's made.
It sounds like it's also a cheaper way of doing business for the ranchers compared to the industrial meat system.
I don't know if it's cheaper. It is certainly more desirable. Anytime that you are taking better care of your animals and keeping them in a trailer less time so they're less stressed out. Anytime that you as a business owner or business employee as a rancher are, not driving around and you're actually being productive. There's not a whole lot of productivity going on when you're driving from spot to spot. And so I think that when we look at the true cost of hauling a trailer of cattle up to Eureka from the Bay Area, it goes way beyond just man hours and fuel costs. And so to have this local, have 60% of our members within 50 miles of this unit is going to be something that they would pay more for. The beauty of the co-op model is that we are going to charge whatever the fees end up being for, let's say we charge $250 to harvest a cow. At the end of the year, we're going to figure out what the actual cost to harvest that cow was. And if it's $200, then the members are going to get that $50 back in dividends. And that's one of the reasons why we love the co-op model, is because we're going to make this as affordable as possible for all our members. Pretty good deal.
I'd say so. With winter coming up, and normally, the holidays, people buy a lot of meats and everything. What are you guys doing in terms of preparation for a potential COVID surge and the demand for delivery of meat products?
I have a ton of ideas about that because it's all I think about right now. Pretty much across the board, our members' businesses surged when COVID broke out. Now, there's a lot of our members that were doing a ton of restaurant business and have had to pivot because obviously that business has gone down to next to nothing. One of the beauties about being small and nimble is that that pivot is not as daunting. And to give you an example, we were doing 10 farmers markets a week when COVID broke out, and then we have our butcher shop. We had been trying to do home delivery for years and couldn't scale it. As soon as COVID broke out, my wife Laura and I made a decision that we were going to make home delivery available immediately at no charge for 2 weeks and see how it panned out. So because we had those vans sitting there idle 3 days a week, we were able to do that. And COVID broke out on March 13th, and by March 16th, we were doing home deliveries all over the Bay Area, and that's now a major part of our business. That's just my business. That's just one example. You will find if you talk to any one of the member farms, you'll find that they've all had that same ability to pivot and to change their business practices and to adapt to this situation. Because at the end of the day, when this broke out and when we have second surge and people don't want to go to the grocery stores anymore and they want to know where their food's coming from and they don't want it coming from some 8-story plant out of the Midwest, we're their only option. And we've been able to, so far, as a collective, we've been able to, meet that demand.
Okay, well, I want to ask you a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in the ranching business?
I grew up on about 1,000-acre ranch in Tamaulipas, mostly sheep, a little bit of beef and pork, and went to Cal Poly as an ag major. Went away for about 20 years to do other businesses. Then in 2008, my wife and I and our very young children in Stockton were in the middle of the housing crisis when the market crashed in 2008. We were super fortunate that we had a small farm here that my grandfather had bought when he retired from the Air Force in 1972 that had a house that was available to us. And so we packed up our kids and moved here. And the first order of business was feeding everybody. And the only thing I knew how to do was raise animals. So without a job or anything else, we bought a couple piglets and 25 meat birds and raised up meat to fill the family freezer so that we could feed everybody. And in doing that, talking with some of my old pals that I hadn't seen in 20 years, we thought we might have a way to get fresh meat to the farmers market that really hadn't been done yet. Back then in 2010, when we started, if you went to the farmers market and if you could find anybody selling meat, generally all you saw was some Coleman coolers in the back there with white wrapped frozen meat that you really couldn't identify other than the stamp on the outside. So we went through the pain of figuring out all the regulations and what we had to do and convincing people we could do it safely, and became one of the first meat vendors locally here that offered up fresh meat at the farmers market. And that was kind of the genesis of our business. We were raising everything ourselves at that time. And we kind of quickly realized that we couldn't do both. We had a little 5-acre farm and we had some other property that we had access to that we leased. But really, we wanted to concentrate on building a network of ranches that we could get their meats out to the market. And that's what we did. So to this day, we have 6 to 8 local ranches, local to Northern California. They supply the vast majority of our meats. And in 2013, we opened our bricks and mortar butcher shop inside a local grocery store. And by spring of next year, we will hopefully have our new butcher shop open in Sebastopol that'll be standalone.
What does it mean to harvest an animal and the difference between local and industry processing in that regard?
I think when you look at where your food comes from as a consumer, the vast majority of Americans, I wrote an article for my newsletter the other day and talked about, how familiar we are with the, $1.99 a pound ground beef and, 99 cents a pound bacon. You can go into any grocery store in the country and find that. And if you really take a minute and stop and think about it, does it make sense? Look at buying a Foster Farms chicken, and you can go into Lucky's and buy a Foster Farm chicken for what, 99 cents a pound. So let's say you're talking about a 3-pound chicken. How the hell are you going to get $3 and convince me that you can raise a chicken to full grown size, haul it off to a slaughter facility, have it processed, have it packaged and shipped back to get to the consumer for $3? It just doesn't make any sense. It's got to be subsidized somewhere. That's a much longer discussion. When you are dealing with small local producers like us, what you're getting is the people that care about the animals, the people that are getting up in the middle of the night when the ewe is having trouble lambing or the cow is having trouble calving, and staying up all night to make sure that animal is born as healthy as possible, to make sure that when an animal is sick, that it's separated out and cared for, that we're not just injecting all our animals with prophylactic antibiotics because we know they're going to get sick. We separate them out when they do get sick and treat them individually. And that goes all the way through processing. The animals that are processed in these CAFO factory farms and factory slaughterhouses are under tremendous amount of stress the entire time. And never mind the humanity of it, it's just bad business. It's bad for the animals, but it's efficient. And that's why it's done. When you buy your food from a local producer, you know that the care is going into it. It would be insane for us to take all that care and concern for these animals all throughout their lives and then not care about how they're slaughtered. That's just not the way we do it. So having total control over the production and the processing for our members is going to be paramount because it ensures that we know exactly how that animal is treated the whole way through because we're not only the members, we're the owners of this.
And I read that you have to actually make an appointment to get these animals to a plant 200 miles away, and maybe they aren't ready to go yet?
Yeah, no, I mean, as it sits right now, it's a very delicate ballet to make sure that you've got your slaughter dates scheduled and you can't miss them. And then you also have to coordinate that with cut and wrap, which is a totally separate operation. And you can be 6 months out on cut and wrap. So you've got to figure out which one's harder to get. Make sure you schedule that first, and then schedule the other one, and then hope your animals are ready to go when that happens. One of the advantages we have is because we're generally talking about pasture-raised animals, is as ranchers, we all have the ability to hold our animals off. We saw a lot of euthanasia of animals over the summer. And I think what people fail to realize is the reason for that, specifically when you talk about pork or chicken, the reason those millions of animals got killed without being processed was because the factory farms can only handle an animal of a certain size. And once a pig gets too big for that machine, they can't process it. And without any way to process it, the only thing left for those farmers to do, and I call them farmers, that's not really fair to farmers. The only thing these corporate ag businesses could do is euthanize them because it didn't do them any good to keep feeding them. That's what happened with millions of chickens and tens of thousands of pigs this summer. We don't ever have that issue because if there's a hiccup in the system, those animals can just stay right out on the pasture and live another happy day.
I heard that. I read about that stuff. And the thing that bothered me is that they couldn't find a place to send those animals to be used. I mean, to me, that was just so wasteful.
That is the fragility of our delivery system in America. And it doesn't matter what product you're talking about. It is incredibly efficient and incredibly fragile. And to answer your question, no, there is no other place to go. The small local processing like we use would have been overwhelmed by 1 hour's worth of what gets produced in, one of those plants. They literally had no other option from a business standpoint. Never mind the humanity of it. Never mind the ridiculousness of it. Never mind the care for the animals as living creatures. From a straight business standpoint, those factory farms, their smartest business decision was to euthanize them. And that's why it's such a bad business model. The philosophical butcher, that's what they're going to call me after this. I hope that the takeaway from this is support of your local producers and whatever food you choose to eat is paramount. That's how you can ensure that you have access to good, quality, healthy, well-raised food, whether it's meat or vegetables or whatever. Get to know the people that are raising your food. Get to know the people that are processing your food. And if you don't have somebody like that available to you, if you don't know where to go to your local farmers market. I think that is the place where you can meet people. I've been doing this for 10 years. I don't do a lot of farmers markets, but you can find me every Sunday at the Fort Mason Farmers Market. And I have countless conversations with people that are asking these very questions that you and I have discussed over the last half hour because they're interested. They want to know where their food comes from, and they want to know that it's being well raised and that humanely treated. And if that's how you feel about your food, and I hope it is, then make sure you get to know who's raising it. And that'll give you a lot of comfort when it comes time to sit down at the dinner table.
All right, Adam, thank you for coming on Method to the Madness. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Method to the Madness, a bi-weekly public affairs show on KALX Berkeley celebrating Bay Area innovators. We'll be taking a brief pause in our programming until next year, and we'll be back in February. So until then, happy holidays and Happy New Year.